I still hear it sometimes, the sound of the trees bending in the wind. It takes me right back to that night, October 2016, just outside of Eugene, Oregon. It was a quiet fall evening, the kind of night where the world outside seems frozen, crisp air, the scent of pine and the rustling of leaves. I had just finished my dinner. The cabin was warm and everything felt like it was in its right place. But then, it started. 3 knocks, sharp and deliberate, against the back door. I froze. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. It was just the wind, or an animal. But it wasn't. No, it was something else. Something big. Something deliberate. I shouldn't even be telling you this, but it's been years, and I still haven't figured it all out. I've got the footage, but I won't share it. Not yet. Not until I understand it all. But it wasn't a bear. My name is Daniel Moss. I'm a wildlife photographer, 32 years old back then, living out of a cabin I'd inherited from my uncle in the Cascade Range. The place sat about 40 minutes from Eugene, down a gravel road that turned to mud when it rained. I'd go there on weekends to escape the noise, to remind myself why I loved this work in the first place. Charlie, my golden retriever, was the only company I needed. Late October that year, the trees were almost bare, and the air had that particular sharpness that comes before the first snow. I'd arrived Friday afternoon with a bag of groceries, my cameras, and a plan to do absolutely nothing but sit by the fire and read. The cabin smelled like cedar and old smoke. The floor creaked in the same spots it always had. Everything was familiar, comfortable, safe. That was Friday. By Sunday, I'd know better. The first night passed without incident. I made spaghetti, drank a beer, listened to the forest settling into darkness. Charlie slept by the hearth, paws twitching as he dreamed. Around 10, I heard the wind pick up, rattling the shutters on the north side of the cabin. I added another log to the fire and went to bed. The next morning, Saturday, I woke to sunlight filtering through the pines. I made coffee and stepped out onto the porch. The air was cold enough to see my breath. Birds were calling from the ridge above the cabin. I felt good, calm. I took my camera and walked the perimeter, shooting close-ups of frost on spider webs, the way light caught the bark on the Douglas firs. Charlie followed, nose to the ground, tail wagging. It was perfect. That afternoon, I heard the first knock. It came around 3 in the afternoon. I was inside editing photos on my laptop when I heard it. 3 distinct knocks on the back door, solid, deliberate, like someone using their knuckles on wood. I looked up. Charlie's ears perked up, but he didn't bark. I waited. Nothing. I figured it was a branch or maybe a woodpecker, though it didn't sound quite right. I went back to my work. 10 minutes later, it happened again. 3 knocks, same rhythm, same door. This time, Charlie growled low in his throat. I stood up and walked to the back door, moving slowly. I opened it and looked out. The backyard was empty, just trees and fallen leaves and the woodpile I'd stacked last summer. I stepped outside, scanning the tree line. Nothing moved. The forest was quiet. Too quiet, actually. No birds, no squirrels, just the wind in the branches. I went back inside and locked the door. That evening, I called my friend Jake, who lived in Eugene. I told him about the knocks. He laughed and said it was probably a raccoon or a deer. I told him it didn't sound like that. He said I'd been out there alone too long, that I was spooking myself. Maybe he was right. I'd heard stories about this area before. Locals in town talked about strange things sometimes. Sounds in the forest that couldn't be explained. Shapes moving between the trees at dusk. I'd always dismissed it as campfire talk, the kind of stories people tell to scare tourists. But now, sitting in the cabin with the fire crackling and Charlie pacing near the door, I wasn't so sure. Around midnight, the knocks came again. This time, they were louder. 3 hard strikes, one after another, like someone demanding to be let in. Charlie barked and ran in circles. I grabbed my flashlight and opened the door. Nothing, just darkness and wind. I closed the door and turned off all the lights. I sat in the dark, listening. The knocks didn't come again that night. Sunday morning, I decided to investigate properly. I grabbed my camera, put on my boots, and headed outside with Charlie. The ground was soft from recent rain, and that's when I saw them. Footprints, big ones. They started near the back door and led toward the tree line. Each print was easily twice the size of my boot, maybe 16 inches long, with 5 distinct toe impressions. I knelt down and measured one with my hand. The depth suggested something heavy, maybe 300 pounds or more. My first thought was, bear. Black bears were common in the Cascades, but these prints didn't look right. Too human-shaped. The toes were too defined, too symmetrical. I followed the tracks into the forest, maybe 50 yards, until they disappeared into a rocky section where the ground was too hard to show marks. I took dozens of photos. I measured the stride length. I looked for scat or fur or claw marks on trees. Nothing. Just the prints. And then I noticed something else. About 20 feet up on a Douglas fir, there were fresh scratches in the bark. Long vertical gouges, like something had reached up and dragged its fingers down. No bear could reach that high. I stood at the base of the tree and stretched my arm up. I'm 6 feet tall, and I couldn't get close. Whatever made those marks was bigger than me. A lot bigger. I didn't want to think the word, but it was there in my head anyway. Bigfoot. I pushed it away. That was ridiculous. Bigfoot wasn't real. It was a myth, a joke, something people made up to sell t-shirts to. Tourists. But the prints were real. The scratches were real. And the knocks had been real. That night, I sat by the fire with my laptop, uploading the photos and searching online for similar tracks. I found forums where people shared sightings and evidence. Some of it was clearly fake, but some of it looked disturbingly similar to what I'd found. Researchers called them Sasquatch or Bigfoot, a primate that lived in remote forests. I read accounts from loggers, hikers, hunters. Some claimed to have heard wood knocks, a way the creatures supposedly communicated. 3 knocks, just like I'd heard. I closed the laptop and stared at the fire. Charlie was asleep, but I couldn't relax. Around 2 a.m, the knocks came again. This time from 2 different directions. One set from the back door, another from the side window. I didn't open the door. I just sat there, heart pounding, waiting for dawn. The next few days blurred together. I'd planned to leave Sunday afternoon, but I couldn't. Something kept me there. Maybe it was the photographer in me needing proof. Maybe it was just stubbornness. I set up my video camera on a tripod by the back door, pointing toward the tree line. I positioned trail cameras around the cabin at various angles. If something was out there, I'd capture it. During the day, nothing happened. The forest seemed normal again. Birds sang. Squirrels chased each other through the branches. Charlie relaxed, lying in the sun on the porch. But as soon as darkness fell, everything changed. I'd hear footsteps outside, heavy and deliberate, circling the cabin. I'd see shadows moving past the windows. Once, I heard what sounded like breathing just outside the wall where I was sitting. Deep, slow breaths, like something large was resting there. I held my own breath, not daring to move. Charlie's behavior confirmed I wasn't imagining things. Every night he'd start pacing around 7, whining and scratching at the door to come inside from the porch. His eyes would track something I couldn't see, moving along the tree line. He'd bark at nothing, or what seemed like nothing. I started recording the sounds at night. When I played them back, there were things my ears had missed. Low-frequency sounds, almost like humming, grunts, and once, very clearly, something that sounded like wood striking against wood. 3 strikes, then silence. I sent some of the audio to Jake. He told me it was probably just wildlife, elk, deer, mountain lions, but I'd been in these woods dozens of times. I knew what those animals sounded like. This was different. This was something else. On Wednesday night, I heard the voice. I'd been lying in bed, unable to sleep when I heard it. A low, gravelly sound from somewhere in the forest. Not words exactly, but something close. A vocalization that had pattern and intention behind it. Charlie heard it too. He jumped off the bed and cowered in the corner, shaking. I grabbed my camera and went to the window. The moon was almost full, casting silver light across the clearing. I saw movement at the edge of the trees, something tall and dark, shifting between the shadows. I hit record. For maybe 10 seconds, I had it in frame. Then it stepped back and vanished. My hands were shaking so badly the footage was blurry. But it was there. Something bipedal. Something massive. I watched the playback 3 times. That's when I finally admitted it to myself. This wasn't a bear. This wasn't an elk. This was what people called Bigfoot. And it was watching me. Thursday morning, I called the sheriff's office in Eugene. I didn't mention Bigfoot. I just said there was something large around my cabin, possibly dangerous, and I wanted someone to check it out. The dispatcher said they'd send a deputy when one was available. Around noon, Deputy Carlson arrived. He was in his 50s, gray hair, skeptical expression. I showed him the footprints, which were still visible near the woodpile. He looked at them for maybe 30 seconds. "Bear tracks," he said. I told him bears don't have 5 toes like that. He shrugged. I showed him the scratches on the tree. He said it was probably a bear marking territory. I played him the audio recordings. He listened with his arms crossed, then told me it was just forest sounds, maybe elk calling. I could see he thought I was wasting his time. Before he left, Deputy Carlson told me a story. He said about 15 years ago, an old man named Harold Vance had lived in a cabin about 10 miles from here. Harold had called the sheriff's office multiple times, claiming something was stalking his property. He described it as a large, hairy creature that walked on 2 legs. The deputies investigated but never found anything. Harold kept insisting. Then one day he disappeared. They found his cabin door open, fire still burning, dinner on the table, no sign of struggle, no body. The official report said he probably wandered off and got lost, maybe died of exposure somewhere in the woods. But they never found him. "People go crazy out here alone," Deputy Carlson said. "The isolation gets to them. My advice? Go back to Eugene for a while." Then he drove away. That night I didn't hear knocks. I heard something worse. Around midnight, there was a sound like something heavy being dragged across the porch. Then silence. I waited, barely breathing. Charlie was hiding under the bed. An hour passed. Then I heard it. 3 knocks. But this time they were slow, deliberate, almost gentle, like whoever was out there was trying not to scare me. I got up and went to the back door. My hand was on the lock. I almost opened it. Almost. But something stopped me. Instead, I just stood there, inches from the door, listening. I could hear breathing on the other side, slow and steady. We stood there like that for maybe 5 minutes. Me on one side, it on the other. Then I heard footsteps walking away, crunching through leaves, fading into the forest. I went back to bed, but didn't sleep. In the morning, I found something on the porch. A woven basket made from cedar bark and grass filled with huckleberries. It hadn't been there before. I picked it up and looked toward the trees. "Thank you," I whispered. I don't know why I said it, but it felt right. That's when I understood. This wasn't a threat. This was contact. I spent Friday trying to make sense of what was happening. The basket sat on my kitchen table. I'd taken photos of it from every angle, documenting the weaving technique, the materials used. It was sophisticated work, not random or crude. Someone or something had spent time making this. I researched online and found accounts of Bigfoot leaving gifts, stacked stones, woven objects, food offerings. Researchers called it gifting behavior, a sign of intelligence and curiosity. Some people believed it was how the creatures initiated peaceful contact. Others thought it was territorial marking. I didn't know what to believe, but I knew one thing. Whatever was out there, it wasn't acting like an animal. Animals don't weave baskets. Animals don't knock 3 times in a specific rhythm. Animals don't leave gifts. This was something else, something aware, something that understood reciprocity. That afternoon, I decided to reciprocate. I took an apple, some jerky, and a shiny compass I had in my gear bag. I arranged them on a flat rock near the tree line where the footprints had led. I felt ridiculous doing it, like I was leaving an offering for a forest spirit. But I did it anyway. Then I went inside and waited. Charlie watched from the window, tail wagging nervously. Around dusk, I saw movement, a shadow detaching from the trees. It approached the rock slowly, cautiously. I watched through my camera lens. The figure was massive, maybe 7 or 8 feet tall, covered in dark hair. It moved with a strange grace, bent forward slightly, arms long enough to almost touch the ground. It reached the rock and knelt down. For a moment, it examined what I'd left. Then it picked up the compass, turned it over in its hands, and looked directly at the cabin. Directly at me. I froze. We locked eyes for maybe 3 seconds. Then it stood up, slipped the compass into the shadows somewhere, and walked back into the forest. That night, the knocks came again. But now they felt different. Not threatening, more like a greeting. 3 knocks. I knocked back 3 times on the doorframe. Silence. Then 3 more knocks from outside. I knocked again. We did this maybe 5 times before it stopped. Charlie had stopped whining. He was sitting by the door, head tilted, curious. Something had shifted. The fear was gone. In its place was something else. Respect, maybe. Or understanding. I stayed up late, watching the footage I'd captured. The figure was clear enough to see details: broad shoulders, long arms, a face that was neither fully human nor fully ape. Something in between. I said it out loud for the first time without any doubt. Bigfoot. The word hung in the air. I wasn't afraid of it anymore. I was in awe. This creature, this legend that people mocked and dismissed, was real. And it was trying to communicate with me. I saved the footage to a secure drive and hid it in my camera bag. I wasn't ready to share this with anyone. Not yet. Saturday, I woke up to find more gifts. 3 smooth river stones stacked on the porch railing. A raven feather tucked into the doorframe. I left more food. This time, fresh fish I'd caught from a nearby stream. The exchange continued. Each day I'd leave something. Each night I'd find something new. The knocks became routine. 3 taps just after sunset. I'd tap back. Sometimes we'd go back and forth for 10 or 15 minutes. It felt like a conversation, even though no words were spoken. I started thinking of it as a dialogue, a way of saying, I see you, and I'm here, and I mean no harm. Charlie started going outside at night again, sniffing around the tree line without fear. Whatever presence had terrified him before, he'd accepted it now. We both had. But then, on Sunday morning, everything changed. I woke up to find my back door wide open, not just unlocked, fully open, swinging slightly in the breeze. I'd locked it the night before. I always locked it. Charlie was still inside, pacing nervously. I grabbed my flashlight and checked outside. No footprints in the immediate area, but there was something on the porch. A large stick, maybe 4 feet long, standing upright against the wall, balanced perfectly, impossible to do by accident. And carved into the wood, crude but unmistakable, were 3 parallel lines, like claw marks, or like the number 3. I stood there staring at it, trying to understand. Was this still friendly, or had something changed? I heard a sound from the forest. Not a knock. A voice, low and gravelly, speaking a language I didn't understand. But the tone was clear. It was a warning. I spent that day watching the tree line. Something felt different. The forest was too quiet. No birds, no squirrels. Even the wind seemed to have stopped. Charlie wouldn't go outside. He stayed by the fire, ears back, occasionally whimpering. Around 4 in the afternoon, I heard it. A different sound. Not the footsteps I'd gotten used to. Something else moving through the underbrush. Something that crashed through branches without care. I grabbed my camera and went to the window. A mountain lion emerged from the trees, maybe 100 yards away. Big, probably male. It moved toward the cabin, low and purposeful. My heart started pounding. Mountain lions rarely approached humans unless they were desperate or rabid. This one looked healthy and hungry. It kept coming. 50 yards, 40. I checked my phone. No signal. I was alone. Then I heard the roar. It came from the opposite side of the clearing, deep and guttural and impossibly loud. The mountain lion stopped. It turned toward the sound. And then I saw Bigfoot. It stepped out from the trees, fully visible for the first time. 8 feet tall, covered in dark brown hair, shoulders wide as a doorway. It slammed its fists against its chest and roared again. The mountain lion backed up, ears flat. Bigfoot took 3 steps forward. The lion turned and ran, disappearing back into the forest. Bigfoot watched until it was gone. Then it turned and looked at me. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. Then it walked back into the trees and vanished. I stood there shaking, my camera still recording. It had saved me, protected me. I knew it then, with absolute certainty. This creature wasn't a monster. It was a guardian. I didn't leave the cabin that night. I sat by the fire, replaying the footage over and over. Every angle, every detail. The mountain lion's approach, the roar, Bigfoot stepping into view, the confrontation, the protection. It was all there. Proof. Undeniable proof. I could release this and change everything. Prove to the world that Bigfoot was real. But as I watched the footage, I realized something. If I shared this, people would come. Hunters, researchers, film crews. They'd tear apart these woods looking for it. And what would happen to the creature then? Would it be studied, captured, killed? I thought about the gifts, the knocks, the way it had protected me from the lion. This wasn't an animal to be hunted or displayed. This was an intelligent being that had chosen to trust me, and I had to decide what to do with that trust. I stayed another 3 days, but the dynamic had changed. The knocks continued, but Bigfoot didn't show itself again. I'd leave food, and it would be gone by morning. Sometimes there'd be a gift in return, but the visible contact had ended. I think it knew I'd seen everything I needed to see. On Wednesday, I packed up my gear. Before I left, I walked to the tree line one last time. I placed the woven basket on the flat rock, filled with supplies, dried fruit, nuts, a waterproof pouch with matches, and a good knife. I didn't know if those things would be useful to Bigfoot, but it felt right. Then I knocked 3 times on a nearby tree. From somewhere in the forest, I heard 3 knocks in response. I smiled. "Thank you," I said. The forest was silent. I walked back to my truck, loaded up Charlie, and drove away. I didn't look back. When I got home to Eugene, I immediately backed up all the footage to 3 different hard drives. I labeled them and locked them in a safe deposit box at my bank. Then I deleted everything from my cameras and laptop. I told Jake I'd had a quiet weekend and that I'd probably overreacted about the sounds. He said he'd figured as much. I didn't tell anyone else. Not my family. Not my colleagues. I went back to work, shooting normal wildlife assignments. Deer, eagles, coyotes. But everything felt different now. I'd seen something that changed my understanding of the world, and I'd made a choice to keep it secret. Not out of fear, out of respect. The creature had trusted me. I couldn't betray that. So the footage stayed hidden, the story stayed untold, and life went on. But some nights, when the wind rattles my windows, I swear I can hear it. 3 soft knocks. A reminder of what's out there. A reminder of what I know and what I've chosen to protect. The months that followed were difficult. I thought about Bigfoot constantly. Every time I was in the woods for work, I'd look for signs, footprints, stacked stones, woven baskets. I never found anything. Or maybe I did, but I couldn't be sure. Once, while shooting photos near the Columbia River Gorge, I found 3 stones balanced impossibly on top of each other on a river beach. Another time, in the Wallowa Mountains, I heard wood knocks echoing across a valley at dusk. but I never saw Bigfoot again. Part of me wondered if I'd imagined the whole thing, if the stress and isolation had made me see what I wanted to see. But then I'd remember the footage locked in the bank, the evidence. It had been real. It was real. And that knowledge sat inside me like a weight I couldn't share. In December, I got an email from a producer at a nature documentary company. They were doing a series on cryptids and wanted to know if I'd be interested in shooting footage for an episode on Bigfoot in the Pacific Northwest. The money was good. The exposure would help my career. But I'd have to go into the field with a full crew, with researchers who'd want to examine every tree and track down every rumor. I'd have to pretend I didn't know anything while they stumbled around looking for proof I'd already found. I declined the job. I said I wasn't interested in that kind of work. The producer seemed surprised. She said most wildlife photographers would jump at the chance. I told her I preferred photographing animals that everyone already agreed were real. She laughed and said that was fair. But after I hung up, I felt sick. I was lying, living a double life, knowing something profound and keeping it buried. It was the right thing to do, I kept telling myself. But it didn't make it easier. Charlie passed away that winter. Old age. He'd been with me through everything, through the knocks and the fear and the wonder. I buried him in my backyard under an oak tree, and as I was covering the grave with dirt, I heard it. 3 sharp raps on the fence behind me. I turned around. Nobody was there, but I knew. Somehow, impossibly, Bigfoot knew. Maybe the creatures had a way of sensing things. Maybe it had been watching me all along, even here in the city. Or maybe I'd just imagined it, my grief creating sounds that weren't there. But I chose to believe it was real. I knocked 3 times on the fence post. The neighborhood was quiet. Just me and the freshly turned earth and the memory of my dog. "Thank you," I whispered, "for being there during that week, for being brave when I was afraid, for accepting what I'd been too scared to believe." I went inside and poured a drink and sat in. The dark. That night, for the first time in months, I slept without dreaming. By spring, I'd started to make peace with my secret. I went back to the cabin a few times, always hoping to see signs, but the forest stayed quiet. No gifts, no knocks, no footprints. It was like Bigfoot had moved on, found some deeper part of the wilderness where humans couldn't follow. I was okay with that. Maybe the encounter had been a one-time thing, a moment of connection between 2 very different species, brief and strange and unrepeatable. I started to think of it the way you think of any profound experience, something that changed you but couldn't be shared, a private knowing. I dated a woman that spring, a teacher named Sarah who loved hiking. We went into the mountains together several times. She'd talk about how peaceful the forest was, how quiet. And I'd nod and agree, knowing that quiet meant something different to me now. It meant listening, waiting, respecting. One night in May, we were camping near Mount Hood. Sarah was asleep in the tent, and I was sitting by the fire, watching the flames. Around midnight, I heard them. 3 knocks coming from the darkness beyond the firelight. I stood up immediately, heart racing. I walked to the edge of the trees. "Hello," I whispered. Nothing. Then 3 more knocks further away. I knew I shouldn't follow, but I did. I grabbed my flashlight and walked into the forest, moving slowly, carefully. The knocks continued, leading me deeper. Maybe 200 yards from camp, I reached a small clearing. The moon was bright enough to see clearly. And there, in the center of the clearing, was a structure. Woven branches arranged in an arch like a doorway, and beneath it, stones stacked in groups of 3. 6 piles, 18 stones total. I knelt down and touched one. It was still warm. Bigfoot had been here recently. Maybe was still here, watching from the shadows. I sat down in the clearing and waited. Minutes passed. Then I heard movement. A shadow detached from the trees on the opposite side. Bigfoot stepped into the moonlight. Smaller than the one I'd seen before, maybe 6 feet tall instead of 8. A female, I guessed, or a juvenile. It approached slowly, stopping maybe 20 feet away. We looked at each other. I didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even breathe. It tilted its head, studying me. Then it reached behind a tree and pulled out something, holding it up in the moonlight. My compass. The one I'd left as a gift 7 months ago. It had kept it. Remembered. It set the compass on the ground between us and stepped back. I understood. This was a return, a closure. The encounter was ending, but it was ending with acknowledgement, with respect. I picked up the compass, stood up, and bowed slightly. The creature watched for a moment longer, then turned and walked back into the forest. I stood there alone in the clearing, holding the compass, feeling something like grief and gratitude mixed together. It was goodbye. And it was enough. I never told Sarah what happened that night. When I returned to camp, she was still asleep. In the morning, she asked if I'd slept well. I said yes. We hiked out later that day, and a week later, we broke up. Not because of Bigfoot, just because we weren't right for each other. She wanted someone more present, more engaged, and she was right. Part of me was always elsewhere, always listening for knocks that would never come again. I moved on, got new assignments, traveled to Alaska to photograph grizzlies, to Montana for wolves. The work was good, the photos were good, but nothing felt as significant as that October in the Cascades. Nothing ever would. I thought about writing it all down, creating a manuscript that could be published after I died. A confession. But even that felt wrong. Like I'd be betraying something sacred. Years passed. I turned 40, then 45. I stopped going to the cabin. The memories there were too heavy, too full of questions I couldn't answer. I sold it to a young couple from Portland who wanted a weekend retreat. I didn't warn them about Bigfoot. What would I say? They'd think I was crazy, and maybe they'd never experience what I did. Maybe Bigfoot only reveals itself to certain people at certain times for reasons we can't understand. I kept the footage in the bank, untouched. Sometimes I'd think about it, wonder if I should watch it one more time. But I never did. I didn't need to. The memory was clear enough. The sight of that creature standing between me and danger, the intelligence in its eyes, the gentleness of the gifts, the trust. One night last year, I was home alone, reading before bed when I heard it. 3 soft knocks on my window. I live on the 3rd floor of an apartment building. There's no balcony, no fire escape, nothing. I got up and looked outside. The street below was empty. I checked the other windows. Nothing. I must have imagined it. But then it came again. 3 knocks, so soft they were almost inaudible. I stood in the center of my living room, listening. The building was quiet. I knocked 3 times on the wall. Silence. Then 3 knocks came back, fainter now, like they were moving away. I sat down on my couch and laughed. It was impossible, absurd, but it was also true. Bigfoot had found me. Even here, in the city, surrounded by concrete and glass and artificial light, the connection remained. I knocked 3 more times. 3 knocks answered, then nothing. Just the hum of traffic and the ordinary sounds of human civilization. But I knew. I still know. Out there, in the forests and mountains and wild places we haven't destroyed yet, something lives. Something intelligent and ancient and worthy of protection. Something I'll defend with my silence until my last breath. I'm 60 now. Retired from photography. My hands shake too much for the camera. But I still have the footage. 3 hard drives in a bank deposit box downtown. I've written a letter to be opened when I die, explaining where they are and what they contain. But the letter also says the footage should never be made public. It should be kept private, stored in an archive somewhere, accessible only to serious researchers who'll treat it with respect. I don't want circus. I don't want Bigfoot hunters tearing through the Cascades looking for proof. The creature deserves better. We all do. Sometimes late at night, when the city is quiet, I still hear them. 3 soft knocks against the window, against the wall, against the door. They're gentler now, almost like a memory, like the echo of something that happened long ago in a different life. And maybe that's all it is. Maybe I'm an old man whose mind plays tricks, whose loneliness creates sounds where there's only silence. But I don't think so. I think Bigfoot is still out there, still watching, still knocking. And I think, in some way I can't explain, we're still connected. That October in the Cascades opened something that never fully closed. A door between worlds, a recognition. And on quiet nights, when I'm alone with my thoughts, I knock back. 3 times. Always 3. And I listen. And sometimes, if I'm very still, I hear the answer. 3 knocks. Distant but clear. A reminder that some secrets are worth keeping, that some wonders exist precisely because we choose not to expose them, that respect and silence can be their own form of protection. I still hear it sometimes. The sound that started everything. 3 knocks in the darkness. And I smile, because I know what's out there. And that knowledge, that private, impossible knowing, is enough. It has to be. It's all I have left. 3 knocks. 1 last time. And then silence. Perfect, protective silence. The kind that lets legends survive. The kind that keeps Bigfoot safe. The kind I'll carry to my grave.